Welcome back to Morgan's video blog, Morgan's online blog in video format. Today I'm here to talk to you about working with a 3-act structure, a Balticon 55 panel. You can find the last 30 minutes of the panel on the Baltimore Sci-Fi YouTube channel. So the panelists were as follows: C.D. Brown as moderator, Meg Eden, Ryan Van Loom, and C.L. Polk. The notional description of the panel was as follows. The 3-act structure has been the standard in Western storytelling for millennia. How can we create innovative, exciting work in a format the audience is expecting? How do we make the middle part powerful and lasting when the most attention-grabbing moments are at the beginning and the end? So, I did miss the first 10 minutes because technical difficulties didn't record them, but let's start off with talking about what is the 3-act structure. The 3-act structure is a method or pacing used in many forms of storytelling from before humans could write. At the most basic level, it breaks the story down into, shockingly, 3 main sections or acts. More complicated versions show even more breakdown between each act if you want more structure for your story. But at its basic level, section 1 is the setup, the introduction of the characters and the world. Secondly, the inciting incident, what triggers the main character to step out of their day-to-day life and face the plot of the story. And thirdly, the reaction, what the inciting incident triggers the main character to do. The second act of the 3-act structure is the confrontation. While soggy middles are common, mixing up emotional growth with progress towards the main goal can help. In the confrontation act, the character overcomes an obstacle but ends up in more trouble repeatedly until the main character hits their low point. And the third act is the resolution. The main character heads towards the climax. The main confrontation of the story takes place, sometimes with a twist. Do try to avoid a Deus ex machina. And of course, the resolution. So, do you have to have your book outlined with all these plot points before you can write? Of course not. It's writing. So, next, the panel asked the panelist, where do you start your story? One of the writers said that they start with an interesting character who lives with an interesting situation and has an interesting problem due to an interesting, quote-unquote, internal screw-up, with an interesting trait thrown in there for flavor, with world building working like creating a gaming world, only with trade-offs instead of game mechanics. Some start with just a character's voice with an image or sense of who they are and the setting. Then the writer works out who that character is fighting against, and the ongoing character development leads to that moment in Act 3 that the character couldn't have achieved in Act 1. Some start with, shockingly, an interesting character and situation, often triggered by questions the writer themselves is struggling with, or problems/memories the writer can't get over. All of that creates tension/unresolved conflict and elements of a character for the writer to connect to. You notice all of these involve something that's interesting for the writer. But do note, all stories need world building, be they fantasy or the world of chess players. Even with stories set in the quote-unquote real world, not all of your readers may be familiar with the realities of the culture and setting you placed your characters. So next up, we talked about creating that turning point. There are obviously many different approaches to creating that turning point and variations on the philosophy that a writer uses to bring the main characters there, because we're writers and we all do it different. But of the approaches, the first is the main character is trying to fix the main issue in a way that won't work. The second option is the consequences of a small choice, quote unquote, earlier come around to bite them in the butt. Or third, they are confronted with a massive new issue. In Western writing especially, we like to see proactive characters. So having the consequences of the main character's action inspire the low point and the character growth show them the way forward tends to be most fulfilling for our readers. And fulfilled readers lead to better reviews and people sharing your book around. Next up, we talked about revision. As I said before, not all of the 3-act structure has to be planned out in the beginning. If you're not a plotter, don't worry about it when you write your story. But that doesn't mean you should ignore it completely. When you go to revise your story, using this structure as a roadmap can help fix a lot of pacing issues, if that's something you're worried about. Now, some writers take the revision time to create tables and tables for each chapter showing pacing and plotting and conflict, etc. Some use revision as a time to make sure all of the plot points are driven by the theme. But Morgan, note here, be careful, too theme driven and you turn your story into an after-school special. Readers do not need to be clobbered over the head in order to find your theme. They're smarter than you think. Plus, in revision, there's always that language editing, making sure the phrasing and word choices fit your world and making sure to differentiate characters' dialogue, etc. So, in conclusion, the 3-act structure may seem like teachers trying to reduce writing to a formula, but it doesn't have to be used that way. You can use it as lightly or as strictly as you'd like, but the trade-off for steady pacing and keeping your readers engaged is often worth it. Let me know what you think of the 3-act structure in the comments below, and I'll see you again next week for more writing tips and writerly musings. Bye-bye.